Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 144th episode of Real Hawk Talk. This is Brian Nemhauser, ad hoc blogger on Twitter, and we've got a show tonight where we will talk about the topic that just will not go away, despite the fact that we all wish it would. We will, and that is Russell Wilson and the Seattle Seahawks and their future together. We will talk in our continuing offseason series about free agency. And in this particular episode, we are going to go deep on defensive line and linebacker, those two position groups. So we've covered the offense. We're going to now switch over to the defense and go into some depth about who we've got, who we should keep and who we should go get. And we'll talk about that. So let me bring in the fellas. First, going to go with Jeff Simmons at Real Jeff Simmons on Twitter, looking very Raider-esque tonight, all black. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing my support for Russell to the Raiders. No, I'm kidding. I'm good. It's nice to be able to talk. There's been so many takes on Twitter in the last 2 weeks since all of us talked. I feel like this will be therapeutic to actually talk to you guys. I've seen so many things that have just been driving me crazy. It will be nice.
And Jeff really means that. Jeff was begging us to do a show a week ago, and I was the party pooper. I don't know. I don't remember, Brian. I think you were maybe that day.
He was with you. I was a whore for clicks. And
I was just like, I am not interested in talking about this Russell Wilson stuff right now. It's just been an exhausting couple of weeks. I feel it's died down over the past week or so, kind of. But Jeff means it when he says it. Like he's been seeing a lot of takes. He's been jumping around about it.
That, my friends, is Evan Hill at Evan in SEA on Twitter. How are you doing, dude?
I'm well. I'm excited to be back. This feels like the needed break that I feel like this show needed from the Seahawks the past couple of weeks. It's been like I just said, it's been tumultuous. What's the right word? Tumultuous.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. That's accurate.
Type a couple of weeks. So I'm excited to come together with you guys tonight.
I feel like it's been more soap opera-ish. Because soap operas, I don't know if you guys ever, when you like stayed home from school sick, like there's nothing on and you like kind of had to just find something soap operas would to pop on there.
What's your favorite soap opera?
I think the only one I really remember watching anything of like Santa Barbara, the one with like the guy had the eye patch.
I've seen it before. Yeah,
I've had a few episodes, but like it's just ridiculous. Like there's no actual like logical plot to anything going on. And if you start at the beginning of this offseason, you talked about Russell getting traded. I mean, that's a crazy, crazy thing. And it still is pretty crazy, but it just feels like a lot of talk about something that won't really amount to much. And I don't know. I was on with Joe Fan yesterday on his podcast, and I think it's going to air tomorrow. But I think all of this gets solved if the Seahawks do what we've told them to do and what Russell Wilson told them to do, which is sign a great offensive lineman. Like, go do that, and I think we're back to where we need to be. Like, I think it's that simple, and all the rest of it, I think, is just like whatever. We can spend time talking about it, but I don't know that anything's gonna change.
Yeah. You guys read the Athletic article by Mike Dugar and Mike Sando. By the way, shout out to those guys on that article. That was what feels like annual bombshell piece on Russell Wilson's relationship with the Seahawks. But did you catch the 3 specific demands that Russell had? I feel like we should cover that.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, that was Albert Breer.
Was that Albert Breer?
Yeah.
Was it really?
Go for the 3 demands, and we'll connect it for you with which article it was.
So I remember 2 of them. I don't remember what the third one was. Jeff, you might have to fill in here. It
was he wanted an offense built around him, and he was happy with the Shane Waldron hire.
That's what. Okay.
Number 2 was, and it's funny the way he phrased it because it literally sounded like Evan talking. I was laughing reading it the whole time.
What?
Like, I want legitimate capital spent on an offensive lineman. I'm like, Evan says that in our thread like every 2 days. And the third one was he wanted more control and personnel say.
Was it? No, I think the third one was agreement on direction of the franchise.
Oh yeah, same idea.
Is it though?
Pretty much.
I've got a different question for you guys about this, and it's a meta question.
Oh boy.
And it's honest, like, can you remember any other player? I would say quarterback, but any other player who has had as many articles come out about his relationship with the team or with his teammates?
Yes.
One player.
One player in mind.
Aaron Rodgers.
Aaron Rodgers. And it's funny that you bring that up because Albert Breer he was on a couple podcasts and he said he thinks that Russell is using Rodgers as his like role. He's like using him. Like Rodgers complained right after the playoff game, if you remember that.
And you're talking about Aaron Rodgers, not Mark Rodgers, right?
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
And there's been a ton of those hit pieces. Like his teammates hate him. He doesn't get along with his coaches. He doesn't get along with his teammates. This whole thing with Mike McCarthy is very similar to Russell and Pete.
But Brian, I get the spirit of your question. Not many. I can only think of one.
Only one.
Yeah.
It's just it's you know, I think it's also just odd because I don't think anyone on the outside would look at someone like Russell, who's, I mean, the guy goes to Children's Hospital all the time. Like he, like dedicated family man, like religious, lives by, values and, seems like a stand-up guy, that someone like that would cause this. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, at least, you see like the guy is so arrogant and, smirky and just like it comes out in all these different ways. You can kind of imagine that he goes into Green Bay and he's like, I think I'm better than all these people, and that he rubs people the wrong way. But it's just a little surprising. And I don't know if that says more about Russell or it says more about the Seahawks and the play, but it's been over multiple years, and like the LOB and the people that were known to kind of clash with Russell, they're all gone. So now that it's still happening, it does bring up some questions about whether it's Russell that's been the one, being part of the problem in that situation, or maybe it's his representation,
what's so weird about it, Brian, is like, I 100% agree with you. There's this like sort of passive aggressive aroma in the air around former players. We even saw it in subtweets from like Richard Sherman, Doug Baldwin, Jermaine Kearse, all in the past like week and a half. There's definitely some sort of like passive aggressive aroma, but I feel like we haven't gotten a ton of clarity on what the issue is. Like what's the disagreement? What's the debate? Like, did somebody do something wrong? What are we talking about?
Here's going to be the thing: is I think the players had issues with him in the past, and we've heard the reasons for that over and over and over again about why they had problems, and it wasn't even necessarily with Russell. If you really want to trace back, a lot of those players, they were clashing with the coaches.
Sure.
Right? They had problems with Pete because of how they were handling people like Russell and Jermaine Ifedi and things like that. And remember, a lot of those LOB guys were low round picks or undrafted free agents with big chips on their shoulder that had to earn everything. And they did not like high round draft picks that just got things handed to them. And Russell, even though he wasn't that high of a round draft pick, and he earned that starting spot, I think they felt like, they didn't like anyone getting a pass. But now I think it's Russell, conflicting with the coaching staff. The thing that'll be interesting is, and it's come up as well, is what's happening going to affect his relationship with the other players on the team? And I don't know that we have any reason to believe it will. But you had people like Mike Robb came out and was like, I think it's gonna be hard for him to go back in that locker room after, calling out the offensive line. And other people were like, no, that's crazy. So I don't know. It's annoying. I think we've all agreed on that. Like when Jeff wanted to come on last week to talk about it, Evan and I were like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I don't want to talk about it. Until something happens, I don't want to talk about it. But Nathan Ernst joins us at Nathan E11.
Look at that beard.
I know, dude. It's coming in.
That is a Santa Claus beard. Oh my God. To be clear, that's a compliment.
Okay,
it's
good.
Amazing
Good.
looking.
Yeah, I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I've been conditioning it and everything. I got like
Nathan, what beard products do you use? Because I know that's why everybody tunes into the show.
I just use, it's Zeus, I think it's called.
Okay, I use the same. Yeah.
Oh, you do? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The sandalwood. I really like
Yeah.
it. Nice. Yep.
Cool. I don't know why I asked that question.
I was just gonna let that linger for a while, see where you guys are gonna take it. Nathan, we were just, I mean, like somewhat obligatorily talking about we haven't been on since the 2 Russell Wilson articles, the most recent ones came out. And so I don't know if there's any additional reactions, that you have about it, or if not, we can move into free agency and talk about
Or are you even aware of any Russell Wilson news since you've been offline?
I've been online. Yeah, I mean, I think, the obvious takeaway there is just to fire Pete, and then I think the problem solved, right? So
as Brian said, it's a very simple discussion.
Yeah, very straightforward.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I'll add to this is so the article that came out on The Athletic was clearly, filled with stuff from Russell's camp, right? That was another Russell-driven story about, where he's been wronged or where he has frustrations. The Albert Breer story that came out in MMQB, as far as I was concerned, was the first salvo we've heard back from the other side. That's how it read to me. It wasn't direct quotes or anything, but Albert Breer is like, the real question is like, how much are Pete and John, are they going to be fed up? Are they going to put up with this? And there's a couple things in there that just kind of painted Russell a little bit less positively. And so I walked away thinking that Albert Breer got a little bit of an insight from Pete and John, and they're kind of like, yeah, cut it out. That was mostly my read of that article.
Is it the particular sentence around him storming out of the room that made you feel that way?
Wasn't that in the
or was that in The Athletic?
That was the Athletic article.
All these articles are confusing me.
That was like the big scoop that Sando and them got.
I got it.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the state of the state. I don't know about you guys. I don't think there's any more real likelihood that he's going to get traded than there was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I think Russell's going to be a Seahawk, and they're going to have a good offseason because Seahawks aren't the only ones looking at defensive linemen in the NFC West. So, folks that didn't see, J.J. Watt signed with the Arizona Cardinals. So,
Pain.
All the more reason to get offensive linemen.
I don't care. I don't think
Oh, stop it.
I'm with Jeff. Go on, Jeff.
Yeah, you know what I was told? I was told that's like buying a 2017 Mercedes.
Okay.
For its actual price in 2021.
But it's still a 2017 Mercedes. Like,
no, you're paying the price of a
car, right?
So hold up.
The Cardinals are going to have to deal with like the cap situation and all that, right?
The problem with them is you're paying $15 million a year on a team that has a lot of holes right now.
Hold up. There's no argument the Cardinals overpaid for him.
Sure.
But
right.
I don't think it makes a discernible difference.
Or no, you really don't think he's still a good player?
I think he's fine. I just don't think in the context of Arizona, it makes that much of a difference.
I will tell you guys, the players that I've had conversations with off the record, so I'm not going to say who, but more than 3. It's not just one person. More than 3 players have said not so pleasant things about J.J. Watt, not as a person, but as a player. They see him as a freelancer who plays outside the framework of the defense to get his own numbers and, causes instability. And so it's interesting. I mean, the Texans defense has been really good sometimes and not as good other times. And he's had so many injuries. I'm with Jeff. I think, could he be an upgrade for them? Sure. Like, is he the difference maker? I don't think so. I'm not too worried about him in that regard.
I'm just fearful of him being paired with Chandler Jones. Like, those two together just don't sound like a positive thing. Am I wrong?
No, you're right.
Like,
it's just, the Cardinals now are just
like, I'm not going to argue the Cardinals didn't overpay for him. Of course they did.
just like they don't have like any cornerbacks under contract. They have a lot of holes on their roster. They have
Did they lose the guy that got like the 15 sacks last year for them?
So Hassan Reddick is a guy who's a free agent this year. We're going to talk
that's what I thought.
a little bit. There's a lot of people saying, why didn't they just pay him?
Right. That's a young guy.
A 25 or 26-year-old guy they drafted 17 overall. And Arizona's had a history of bringing in older players at the end of their careers. It's a flashy move, and it doesn't really do much. And obviously, different regimes, different things. Obviously, J.J. Watt is a good player. I'm not like tearing him down. I just don't think it makes a big difference on their ceiling as a team. I really don't.
I think like JJ Watt is like an upgrade over Quentin Jefferson. That's about, where I'd put him.
Was that a troll comment?
A little bit. I mean, he's going to get cut. Jefferson's going to get cut, any day now. So
yeah, the Seahawks should absolutely bring him back.
Yeah. Speaking of which, let's get into it. So, defensive line, right? We're doing the whole defensive line tonight, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
And linebackers. So we'll cover those. We definitely have some Patreon questions to go in. And if you haven't already, click subscribe on the channel, click the little bell to get notified when we go live, and subscribe over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. I've seen a bunch of people signing up. They're smart because we are coming up on what should be our time when we donate this year. And I'm hoping with things going in the right way with the old pandemic, that maybe we'll do the charity function this year, and I'll be able to use some of that money to buy some gifts for all of you, calls from players and coaches and all sorts of
What
things.
month is that typically?
Usually it's April, but sometimes it's been May. So, I've been thinking about sending a note to Tracy and seeing what's going on, but I figure they're in the middle right now trying to figure it out themselves. Last year it was going to be at Top Golf, the new Top Golf in Kirkland, and you guys can only imagine how disappointed I was, not only to not have the function, but not to be able to go to the Top Golf opening. That was tough. That was it's one of the stories of the pandemic that hasn't come out, but I had to let it out now. So I love how I disappoint you guys so regularly. It's one of my favorite things to do. Nathan, where do you want to start? Linebackers or defensive line? You call.
Oh boy. Let's do linebackers first.
Jeff, can you tell us who we've got on the roster under contract at the linebacker position?
All right. We have Bobby Wagner, a middle linebacker. We have Jordan Brooks. We have Cody Barden, and we have Ben Burke-Irvin.
Okay. So we do not have a starting Sam.
No, yes? KJ Wright is a free agent. And Bruce Irvin's technically a linebacker. He's a free agent. And then Shaquem Griffin's status has been unclear for this year.
Okay. And for those that don't know, Bruce Irvin, he had a second surgery. So it seems like it's questionable whether he'll even be able to play. He has said publicly that if he's not going to play for Seattle, he's not going to play. So, that if he's able, he's going to want to come back. Let's first start by talking about the guys that are free agents. Nathan, of those guys that Jeff mentioned, are there any on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being you have to sign them? Are there any of those guys that are over a 4 for you? That would be KJ Wright, Shaquem Griffin, Bruce Irvin, and who's the one that I'm missing?
I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think Jordan Brooks looked good enough that I don't think KJ is a have to have back kind of guy. He's probably still like a 3, just because he's continued to play really well, but he's not a have to have.
That's where I am as well. I mean, in isolation, I think KJ Wright's a guy that you want back. I mean, there's no one. Let's just say this: is there everyone in agreement that KJ Wright has another year or two, it looks like, of being a starting quality linebacker based on how he played this year?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah. So it's not that. I don't want anyone walking away thinking that we didn't see what KJ Wright did last year. But given what cap we'll have to create and what he'll potentially command and what his age he is, I don't know that that's where I want them spending the money.
He might be Jeff is about to hate what I'm about to say, but KJ is a player that you might be surprised by how much money he gets in free agency.
No, I would agree with that. I think it's a limited position. I think there would be schemes that I know Oakland has Gus Bradley there. The Jets have Robert Saleh. They both have some money. That's a perfect guy to put in those teams that need a guy like him.
Yeah.
From the Seahawks perspective, where they're so limited cap wise, Bobby's making, I think, 17 cap
0.5. Yeah.
20 next year. I think it's so.
Oh, you're talking his cap number? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that. And you have Jordan Brooks, like Nathan just said, to invest in another linebacker in a cap that's shrunk, and the Seahawks are super limited. There was a chart that went around that showed how little cap room and draft capital they had today. To add more money to the linebacker position, I almost have it as like a one, like you can't sign KJ as much as I like him. The Seahawks have just kind of made their bed with all these other moves where they're so tight against the cap and they have so many other things they need to do. To put more money into a 30-year-old linebacker to me would be such a mistake.
Yeah, Bobby's hit is 17.1 this year, 20.3 next year.
So, and then, I mean, Bruce Irvin or Shaquem, I mean.
Would you bring back Bruce at like a reasonable price, though?
If he was healthy and you could bring him back at
like a close to a vet minimum, like, would you do that?
I think you're going to have a hard time, like maybe a couple million he's going to cost at least.
Sure. So like 2 to 3 million. Would you do that?
I mean, he signed $2 million coming off a decent year, right?
Is that what he signed?
Yeah, 1 year, $2 million.
Okay, so then he might be.
I don't think it was that low.
I think Evan was very upset about his contract.
I thought he was 5.
I think it was 5.5 actually on the dot.
I remember Evan being really mad.
Okay, it was 4.65 with 500K in $1 million in escalators. So 5.5 was his top hit, but he didn't hit that. He only hit 4.6.
Yeah, I actually, for whatever reason, just looked at his bonus and not like everything else. So you're right. Okay, he was 5. So I mean, yeah, I think then still coming off the injury and everything, a year older, I don't think it's crazy to think he could be 2 or 3 million.
Yeah. I mean, I think it just seems pretty unlikely and probably not a place I'd spend a bunch of time thinking about. So basically, we're all saying none of the guys that were free agents or on our team last year that are free agents now are guys that you have to sign. And if that's the case with a guy like KJ Wright, that means you probably won't sign him, or at least odds are you won't. If that's the case, are you guys looking for free agents or are you looking to the draft? Jeff, maybe we'll start with you on this one.
I think it's a spot where if you can find a minimum guy as a hedge in free agent, sort of like a league vet minimum $1 million guy, that's fine. I think ideally you can give that spot to Cody Barton. You can give that spot to a draft pick. You're going mostly nickel defense at this point. You're going to go Brooks and Wagner most of the time. It's a spot I want to fill for as little money as possible. Ideally, it's a spot you want more athleticism. You want somebody who can set the edge. So ideally, but they have such little draft picks. Where are you going to spend on a Sam linebacker? So vet minimum guy, Cody Barton. I don't see many other exciting opportunities.
Linebacker is just not a spot that they should be spending any more than $2 to $3 million on a single player in free agency. Bottom line.
I've got a name for you.
Is it going to blow those number expectations out of the water?
No, it's not. He's going to come super cheap.
Okay, who is it?
What do you guys think about Reuben Foster?
From Washington?
Yeah. Never played for Washington. Injuries. Played for the 49ers for a while and was very good. And then injuries, and he had
remind me what the incident was. Was it domestic violence?
I have to look it up. He had multiple issues.
Yeah, there was a drinking, and
I'll pull that up. I mean, he was a first round pick, like that looked like a great linebacker at one point. He'll be a 1 year minimum contract guy.
So let me answer this from purely a football perspective. Yes.
He has been arrested 3 different times for domestic violence.
3 times.
Yeah, the first
all domestic violence.
Yeah, so his girlfriend the first 2 times recanted, but then he went on to be arrested on probable cause misdemeanor domestic violence charges.
When was his most recent arrest?
2018. And then there's various other things like being arrested for possession of marijuana, Assault weapon possession charges. No.
Sounds like a fun
No.
guy.
Yeah.
He was like a top 5 talent that fell down the draft because he was loaded with red flags, and those red flags have turned out to be very true. And
Yeah.
So you know what? Let me rephrase the question Brian had. What do you think the Seahawks will take a look?
no,
I don't know if I agree with that.
I don't think he's an outside Sam linebacker.
But he could be a Sam linebacker is not an outside backer. That's a I mean, depending on what kind of defense they're going to play, like the Sam for the Seahawks is playing over the tight end, and you know, I don't know. He was a very good player when he was healthy, but
So did he just tear his ACL this past year,
like
or what
nerve
happened?
damage? Like it was a pretty injury wise. It was pretty bad too. So I mean, he's definitely like
Jeez.
total.
It's like buying a penny stock.
Yeah, he's missed 2 years now. Actually, I didn't realize that he injured himself. He got hurt in 2019, was pupped for 2020, and then IR'd again on 2020.
We should clear things up for folks that are listening, because this happens. It's very confusing. When you look at free agent linebackers, you see all these names pop up that are like, whoa, those are interesting guys. But a lot of them are defensive ends in the Seahawks defense. So like Leonard Floyd, I hear people asking about, he's not a linebacker for the Seahawks. He would be a defensive end. You know, Matt Judon, Bud Dupree, Melvin Ingram,
All edge guys.
Keel Barrett, even Kyle Van Noy. You know, I'm going on down the list here.
Leonard Floyd could be a Sam for the Seahawks. But what a waste. I mean,
yeah.
The Seahawks are absolutely going to sign a Sam, because Barton can't play Sam. He can barely play Mike or Will. Putting him up on the line and asking him to do that, like, just not an option. So they're 100% going to sign somebody, and it's going to follow in the line of the Mike Morgans and the Michael Kendricks and the Bruce Irvins, and it could even be Bruce Irvin again, right? It'll be somebody down in that $3 to $5 million range. They've always had a Sam, and I think they will always have a Sam. And hopefully it's someone that doesn't see the field a whole lot because they're playing more nickel.
What do you guys think about Pernell McPhee?
Don't know a whole lot.
33, so he's on the older side, but he's in that range where he's going to be super cheap, but he's been a plus pass rusher before, and definitely fits I think the mold of what a Sam could be.
I don't know that he moves well enough.
Yeah, he's a bigger player, but he's a guy in terms of price range. He's going to be $1-2 million in this market.
Exactly.
That fits where their sweet spot will be for the spot, for sure.
I'm looking. He's 6'3", 265. He's like, yeah. I mean, he's more of an edge player.
He's a bigger rusher, more of a power rusher.
But I mean, he's a good pass rusher. Like even last year, still he was a good pass.
He played
rusher.
well last year in Baltimore.
Yeah. I don't know. He's an interesting name to me. I mean, Aldon Smith is another one on here that people are going to think of as he's not a linebacker for us. He's a defensive end. So like, and I have to think that the Cowboys are going to do whatever they can to bring him back.
Did you see the Jane Slater note on Aldon Smith with the Seahawks a couple weeks ago? Anyone see that?
No. So,
that the Seahawks tried to trade for him last year, and Jerry Jones was still spiteful about how the Earl Thomas stuff went, that he refused to give him to the Seahawks. And then apparently they were mad again because the Cowboys were trying to get Jamal Adams, and the Seahawks swooped in and screwed up their offer. So apparently they blocked the Aldon Smith trade out of spite.
You know what my response to that is? Fuck Jerry Jones. Piece of shit. I hate him. Seriously. Yeah. He's a piece of shit.
He is. He's the worst. Is there any what about Kyle Fackrell? Is he going to be too expensive?
No, he will not.
Because he's a good linebacker. Like, you guys know he played with the Giants last year. I'll pull up his PFF grades, but my recollection is that guy's like a tackle machine, really sound. like these are not guys that are going to like change the trajectory of your defense much, but he's a solid player. Let me
I think he had like a 4 sack game against the Seahawks once.
Oh, so I didn't grade him very well last year. He had a 58 grade. So, maybe I'm smoking something, but I could have sworn he was a good player. And when I've seen him, maybe I'll look at the numbers and he just had a bunch of tackles and showed up that way. But PFF certainly didn't like him.
I only know about him from Justice Mosqueda, who is a popular Twitter account for football. He follows the Packers and he despised Fackrell.
Okay. Is there anybody on the free agent list that stood out to any of you at the linebacker spot?
For me, no, just because like there's just not much need here from the Seahawks perspective. So like even the better names on here or kind of the interesting names on here, like I don't get too excited about it just because I think you're pretty set with Wagner and Brooks. I think if you're gonna go do anything splashier, you should be trying to get KJ to come back, right? And then so it's really just about who is the random Sam that they're gonna sign for something as close to the vetman as possible. And it's hard to get excited about really any of those names. So
yeah, I'm going on down the list. I mean,
there's Malcolm Smith.
yeah. This is why I picked linebackers first, though, because I figured it would be a quick conversation, and then we can get to the meaty stuff.
Yeah, like all things being equal, sure, KJ would be a great guy to be bringing back, but they have $4 million of cap room right now before they open up stuff, and they got to sign an offensive lineman to please Russell. They need a tight end. They need a cornerback.
They need to sign an offensive lineman to please Russell. Like they need to sign an offensive lineman because they need an offensive lineman.
A little of both.
Yeah.
The KJ thing sucks, though.
It sucks. He's going to get squeezed out.
I don't know that he is. I mean, I think there's at least a 50-50 chance he's back with the Seahawks.
Oh, that seems really high.
I think it is. I think he's in the Chris Carson camp where he's going to go out there and not get nearly the market he thought and potentially come back. Now, I don't know. We'll see. I just don't know that there's gonna be that much money out there for him, especially an older linebacker. So we'll see. He and if he does go, I guess linebacker for me is a position you can always get a young player to come up. What I'm not comfortable with is going in there thinking that Cody Barton is your starter. Like I'm not ready to depend on Cody Barton, although he really did play well with special teams.
You are really not a Cody Barton fan.
I'm not.
Another great use of the Seahawks third rounder.
Oh man.
I would love to be proven wrong. And he, like I said, he did show up on special teams in a way that made him look like an NFL player. So I think that's promising. And people might think that's just like a patronizing comment, but he didn't have to make plays anywhere, but he did. He made plays. So that bodes at least better than not making plays. But when he's been in there at linebacker, I think he's been a total. I mean, Jordan Brooks wasn't great last year, and he was a significant upgrade over Cody Barton. Like pretty meaningful. So anyway, so let's wrap here. I think what I'm hearing is general agreement that they will probably sign a veteran Sam, spend less than $3 million on that in free agency, and then roll with Burke-Irvin and Barton as backups. Is that what we're all thinking?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so let's talk about defensive line because, I mean, that was all we talked about last season. Jeff, set us up on baseline with who we've got that's under contract this year.
Well, I'll do that, and then there's one polarizing question going around that we got to talk about because I'm surely opinionated about it. So we'll start at the 5 technique spot. They got LJ Collier and Rasheem Green coming back. So they're pretty comfortable there. The Leo, they still have Carlos Dunlap under contract for 1 more year at $14 million. They have Darrell Taylor coming back. Who knows if he'll play this year. Alton Robinson is still under contract. And then on defensive tackle, they have Poona Ford, Jaron Reed, Brian Monet, and Cedric Lattimore, who played in that last playoff game.
They also have, so Puna is restricted, right?
Yeah, he's restricted.
Yeah, he'll cost like 2 point something next
What do
year.
you think they're going to tender him at?
Second round, probably.
Yeah, second round sounds right.
Yeah.
That's like 2.7, I think, this year.
Yeah, I think that.
Because it increases 15% per year or something like that.
So say the names again, just in order. You don't have to say their positions. Just
Okay, so you have Dunlap, Alton Robinson, Daryl Taylor. Those are your main pass rushers. Then the other spot, you got Collier and Rasheem Green. And then Puna, Jaron, Brian Monet, and Cedric Lattimore.
You don't really have Puna. I mean, you probably, but it'll take some money to sign him. But like, okay, if we're gonna, I think we all assume they're gonna keep Puna.
Of course.
Okay. Anyone?
No, we can just exclude him.
So then, if that's the case, okay, you said you had a controversial question, Jeff. Go for that.
Well, the big question surrounding the Seahawks, and I know I saw Evan talk about this the other day, and
I hope I know what you're about to say.
I got into it with Brady Henderson about this, and there's a lot of talk about Carlos Dunlap right now, his contract. He's due $14 million. He's got zero guaranteed money after they redid his contract left. It is almost a school of thought now, and it's pretty consistent that everyone thinks they're going to cut him. It's one of their biggest levers to create cap room. You can't go 5 minutes on Twitter without seeing that Dunlap's going to get cut. I saw Evan tweet about this, and I could not have agreed more with it. I think it's an insane idea.
Say why.
Well, one, we saw what the pass rush looked pre and post Dunlap. You saw what he did for other players. He unlocked Jaron Reed. He unlocked Benson Mayowa to an extent. Benson Mayowa is also a free agent, by the way. We know that he fit the Leo perfectly. His length in a division that runs the ball a lot. He was really good as a run player. He had some great moments against the Cardinals, and the team has so many holes. I mentioned all the holes in the other segment: cornerback, tight end, offensive line. I know the Dunlap move would create a ton of cap savings, but you're just creating another massive hole in a year where you're stretched really thin. To me, that is, and I know Brady was saying this, that the Seahawks some people believe they can just get him back for cheaper, right? He's making $14 million. Maybe in the market, he'll come back for cheaper. I think that would be an insanely stupid risk. I think Dunlap fits where the team is in terms of like a championship win now window. I think having him on a short-term deal sets up to the next group where you have Taylor, you have Robinson. I don't see any benefit really, unless you're sure you can get him back for cheaper, or sure you can replace him. Because you're not just clearing $14 million, because you're going to have to pay to replace him.
Yeah, and if you want to, on the idea that you would try to bring him back, why wouldn't you just extend him then?
That's the whole thing.
And that's what me and Brady got into it about.
Huh.
You do not need to take the risk of cutting him. Sign him to a 2-year extension. Drop his year one cap hit from 14 to like 3 or 4 this year. Save 10 million cap space. Carlos Dunlap is a player you want a part of this team. I think comfortably saying the next 2 to 3 years. Like he inspired a complete defensive turnaround this year. Like we should not forget what this defense looked like pre Carlos Dunlap. It was bad. The defensive line was very bad. They should not take the risk of cutting him. Make it work on an extension. The pass rusher market is insane. They could get sniped by some desperate shit franchise that comes in and says, hey, we're going to pay you more money than the Seahawks will. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but why take the risk? The risk is unnecessary.
There's no way they're cutting him to re-sign him. Either they're extending him,
Well,
or
that's
they're
what
moving
people
on,
keep
or they're
saying.
moving.
But Brian,
no
there's
way.
absolutely media talk about it. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but people are saying it could happen. And I think that's insane.
It's absolutely insane. To me, it's not insane that they would do it, that they would cut him. I do not agree with that move, but I can imagine a scenario where they do that. I mean, I put out a poll yesterday. If you could only have one, Corey Linsley or Carlos Dunlap, which would you pick?
Yeah.
And no surprise, at least if the Seahawks GM was Seahawks Twitter, it would be Corey Linsley, and everyone knows how much pass rush matters. So I don't know. I just don't. You're not going to get a pass rusher of his quality for that price, even for $14 million. You're just not. And to be able to extend him and potentially lower his cap hit and have him and Darryl Taylor and Alton Robinson, like you'd have a position of strength. You kind of be set. So I just don't get it. I don't get it.
And I got into it with Brady, not into it. We went back and forth because he said what Evan and Nathan said. I said to him, why don't you just extend him? And he was saying, well, if you're Dunlap's camp, wouldn't you want to hit free agency this year?
No.
Yeah, that's what I said. No, like the market is the worst time to hit free agency. And we're going to get into it in a little. Pass rusher, we talked about wide receiver a couple weeks ago. Pass rusher is by far the most loaded position in free agency. Mm-hmm. You're potentially costing yourself a ton of money. He might get like a 1 year, $7 million deal out there. And sure, maybe if the Seahawks can do that, they'd be happy. But if you're his agent, you don't want to hit free agency. When we go through the names, you're going to see the amount of guys that come out. It doesn't make any sense to me. The extension seems so obvious.
If you want to create space, like cut Jaron Reed and sign Ndamukong Suh.
Yeah,
I'm glad you mentioned Jaron Reed. I think he could be a potential surprise cut next week.
Well, the thing that would be surprised if you cut him is like he had enough sacks and he's young enough that you have to think they'd try to trade him, right?
Fair.
They wouldn't get much for him, but I think that's the move.
Could they get a 5th round pick for him?
They better. They got a 5th round pick for Michael Bennett.
Bengals couldn't get a 5th round pick for Carlos Dunlap though.
The tough thing with Reed is in a trade, the cap is being squeezed a lot. So Reed is making, I think, $13.5 million. His cap number is this year.
8.3 of that is base, so 8.3 is what the receiving team would take on.
Yeah, so I think you can get a guy like Reed for, I think, a lot cheaper than that. To someone to give up draft capital to take on 8.3 of Reed, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stupid people out there, though, Jeff. Like a lot.
There are.
And he's got the sack numbers. He really does. In his last 2 full seasons he's played, he's been a 6.5, 7 or more sack interior lineman who's also a good run defender, and he's like 26. Like he's young. So to say there'd be no market for him, and $8.5 million is not a lot. For
normally, no. This year it might be.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think in any event, the point we're making is you can create cap space other ways, and Dunlap would be a weird one. It would be a weird one. So. Nathan, you were going to say something. I think I cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh, I don't remember anymore. I think all I was going to say is, so if you trade him, you save $8 million, right?
If you trade Jaron Reed?
Right.
No, if you trade Jaron Reed, yes. I can't do math.
Because the other team would take the 8. So
I can't do math. 8. Yes, you're right.
So you have – so like, you're saying, well, then just sign Ndamukong Suh. Well, Suh signed for $8 million last year. And so, like, if you do so, you have to now find a way to replace him for less than $8 million. And I don't know if you're really going to do that.
Fair enough. I don't know that Sue's going to get $8 million again at 34, but who knows? Maybe he wouldn't play for less. Yeah, I mean, there are some other names out there. I don't know what Corey Peters' health is going to be coming off his injury, but he's another old interior lineman who's super good for, not super good, but he's at least a totally competent player inside.
So I have a dream free agent.
Oh God.
That the Seahawks should bring in on the defensive line.
Yes.
I feel absolutely passionate about this. Okay. The Seahawks should Nathan, why are you laughing already?
I just have a feeling that I know where this is going, and it's the most baffling thing if it is. But go ahead, finish your thought.
The Seahawks absolutely need to buy low on Jadeveon Clowney and bring him back.
Oh, sure.
He had 0 sacks last year, played 8 games, was a complete tragedy with the Titans. His price is bottom of the barrel right now. His price is so low right now. His value is so low right now. I think you could get him at a price that makes it worth it to bring him in. I mean, would you do a 2-year, $10 million, $11 million, $12 million deal with him? $6 million a year? I know I'm throwing numbers out there.
Sign that. You are forgetting this guy held.
He just
out
signed a 1 year,
seasons.
14.5, Brian, and completely shat the bed. His value is zero. His value is zero.
You might have the APY right, but like he's not signing a 2-year deal at that.
Okay, so maybe a 1 year deal.
I think he's a perfect.
Okay, so would you take him on a 1 year deal at $5 to $6 million?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think there's no way he's under $8 million. No way.
I don't know, dude. 0 sacks in 8 games.
So you want me to go through this list of defensive ends?
Yes.
Yep.
Because defensive end, I mentioned, is by far.
You got to start with Brandon Jackson and Cassius Marsh.
Oh God! If they sign Brandon Jackson, I'm never coming on this podcast again. Okay, so I mentioned edge is by far the strength of the free agent class, which is why, again, I reiterate, Dunlap hitting free agency makes no sense. So you have Shaq Barrett, Matt Judon, Yannick Ngakoue, who we were talking about, like giving up like a first and a second last year for. He's available. Bud Dupree, who's going to be like a $15 million player. Carl Lawson, who's coming from the Bengals. Trey Hendrickson, I think, had 13 sacks this year. Leonard Floyd, we saw what he did to the Seahawks. And there's a group of like older players who are still pretty good. Justin Houston, Alden Smith, Melvin Ingram, Jadeveon Clowney, Everson Griffin, Ryan Kerrigan. And then there's some younger players as well. There's Romeo Okwara, who's the brother of the guy Derek was dying to draft last year. He had a good year. Danico Autry's been good for the Colts. Kerry Hyder had a really good year with the Niners last year.
Hyder's, he's going to get paid. That guy was good.
So, like, there's like 20 defensive ends out there.
I mean, you keep going. I mean, there's Taco Charlton. I mean, like you're talking about some of the top levels. There's Taco Charlton, there's Vic Beasley. There's
Benson Mayoa.
Hassan Reddick, we just talked about. Benson Mayoa.
Did you guys say Melvin Ingram or no?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a buyer's market. Other than those top guys, the top 4 or 5 will get paid huge, and then after that,
Tack McKinley, Derek Wolf, Sheldon Rankins is still an interesting name for me.
Yeah, he's more D tackle, unless D tackles.
Arcavius Mingo, Deion Jordan.
Everson Griffin's an interesting name. Like, again, if you're talking about the Bruce Irvin level, cheapo, like defensive end veteran, I mean, he could be a $5 million player for sure, or less. Trent Murphy's an interesting name still. Ryan Kerrigan, I think you said.
Carl Lawson.
Yeah, Carl Lawson's going to do really well.
You think?
Yeah, he's one of the, because he's like 25. 26.
What do they need?
Not much, honestly. They have, if Darrell Taylor can actually play, they sort of need a speed rusher.
I mean, they have Alton who can kind of do that, right? Hopefully they keep Dunlap. I think cutting him would be a mistake. And then you see what you get out of Taylor. Maybe you can bring Mayoa back for cheap. I mean, it's kind of, I think you hang back and see if anyone drops that you can pounce on. Like maybe it's a Clowney or one of these other older guys, or just somebody falls through the crack and it's a tight year with the cap, and so you can get somebody. But there's not to me, unless you cut Dunlap, there's not a super strong need here.
No.
Well, I came out really against the Dunlap cut thing. That made no sense to me. Would you take, for the same money or less, Ryan Kerrigan over Carlos Dunlap?
For less, I would, sure.
Right. Like if you could get Kerrigan for $8 or $9 million, would you take
Kerrigan?
No, I wouldn't.
He's 33.
I would not.
I don't think I would.
I think you're creating a bigger problem than a solution there.
I like Ryan Kerrigan a lot. As part of it. Like I
just don't think he's a number 1 pass rusher. He was the number 5 pass rusher in Washington.
Well, that was like one of the best edge.
I know, but I think that Dunlap in a division like this, where you got to play against the Niners, who are probably the best run team in the league. You got to play against the Rams, who run the ball a lot. The Cardinals, you need a sort of that big alpha defensive lineman. And I think Kerrigan's more at this point of a third down rusher.
How much do you think Kerry Hyder is going to get a year?
8.
8?
Yeah, he's kind of a outlier contract.
30. I would take Kerry Hyder over Dunlap.
Like for the same price?
Not for the same price, but they're pretty close. He's, I think, younger than Dunlap. And if he's going to be less, I would take Hyder. Hyder is like super active, man. I mean, he is really good.
Dunlap is not the person to play these salary cap games with.
Yeah.
I just do not feel good about that.
And the thing is, he fits.
Right.
Like
that's just, they have so many needs right now. And if you turn their defensive line into a weakness on top of all the other things they got, they're going to lose KJ probably. They're going to lose Shaq Griffin probably.
How much is Melvin Ingram going to get paid?
See, that's a guy that's
32 years old.
low teens.
A lot of injury issues.
Oh no, his body's breaking down. He's not going to get in the teens.
And the problem here too is that Dunlap's a different player than Hyder and Kerrigan and Ingram, right? Like he's a bigger dude. He kind of, anchors your line in a different way. Like, so, even like, the guy that's probably at the top here, like Matt Judon, is a different type of player from Dunlap, which isn't to say that you wouldn't be upgrading with Judon, right? But I think that you would still need to, because now you're pretty light then at that point, right? With Judon and Robinson and Taylor, like there's not a ton of beef there. And I don't know how really important that is in the end, but I think that's probably something that Pete cares about. So I don't know.
How much is Leonard Floyd going to get?
I was muted. Oh, big money. Big money. He had 11 sacks last year.
Yeah, he's a top 10 pick that
he like high teens.
I can see him going back to Brandon Staley.
He's another one. He's 240 pounds.
Yeah, I don't think he's a great fit for our system either.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Like, I mean, the default is you stay with what you got, and I think it's good. But if they don't extend, like, I'll put it this way: if they don't extend Dunlap to create space to sign players that they do need, then I would rather them, like, if the question is Dunlap 1 versus some of these guys that we're talking about, then it's a harder decision. If it's Dunlap versus Kerrigan and, who else can you get for $4 or $5 million if that's the gap in salary, or $6 million?
The problem is, like, there's some physics here that is challenging, right? Because if you're going to sign Lindsley, like, he's probably going to sign in the first day or two of free agency, right? And so you have to cut Dunlap, then sign Lindsley, and then hope that the guy you like is there in a week and suddenly, out in the rain, right? So, like, you could cut like the hypothetical of Dunlap or Lindsley and whatever guy you think is going to fall through the cracks is, easier to answer than actually doing it in practice and seeing. You don't know, right? You don't know who's going to end up there.
You don't, but I mean, and you don't have to cut the guy until you have the guy to sign. So that's not how the order of operations works. Generally, you cut to create cap space when you've got a guy that you're ready to sign. So I don't think they have to take that major risk, but I think it's a 1-for-1 Lindsley for Dunlap salary wise. I don't think Lindsley's going to get over $14 million a year at center.
If he Evan, you'd know this. If Lindsley gets a huge deal, like, is his first year cap hit going to be massive?
No, it's going to be super low.
And that's why I don't get, why can't you fit in both?
You can.
Oh yeah, I'm sure you can. I was just being hypothetical. So I mean, to me, it's more like I've been throwing out hypotheticals: Kerrigan and Gerald Everett versus Dunlap. Like, does that start to get more of a question that you ask yourself? And you guys are all shaking it off. It's interesting. You guys are really attached. Like, I love Dunlap. So, I mean, I love pass rush. I think we're in good shape there. I've seen in the chat, some people are like, don't, take something that's now fixed and break it again. And I think that's totally wise words. I get it. But you do have to create space somehow. And if they're not going to extend him,
why not?
Maybe he doesn't want him. I mean, maybe he doesn't want, for whatever reason, maybe he doesn't want.
Maybe he wants to hit free agency next year.
Right.
That would make sense.
So,
but do you think that this team is better with Gerald Everett and Ryan Kerrigan than Dunlap? I don't think you're better. You're talking about a backup tight end, a backup tight end and a rotational pass rusher. Like, I like Kerrigan. I think that, if you can cut Dunlap and get Kerrigan at a significantly lower price and allow you to do something bigger, then cool. But like, if the thing it allows you to do is sign Gerald Everett to ideally back up Will Dissly, like, no, absolutely not. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I'm just picking out some guys. I don't know if Gerald Everett would be the backup for the Seahawks, to be honest. But
reminder, guys, we do have a ton of Patreon questions too.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, then it just keeps coming down to the question: if you need cap room, why not just move on from Reed, who's slightly above average?
Well, it's a different position, and they don't have, like, if anything, their defensive tackle position is way thinner than their defensive end position.
It's just, this whole conversation is frustrating because the answer is so simple. Like, they just need to get deals done, extensions done with some of their core players. We don't know the answer as to why these deals aren't done yet. Maybe these players are holding out for a better cap, salary cap floor next year. It could be cash flow, financial, reasons on the organizational side. But the easy way to open up cap space here is to extend some of their core players. That we should be super clear about that.
Agreed. And we'll get to Patreon questions here in a second. I would just say, I think we're all on board with extending Dunlap.
Yeah,
that can happen. That just makes sense. I don't think we've answered how they address defensive tackle. They can't just come back next year with Poona Ford, Jaron Reed, and Cedric Lattimore. Like, that's.
Okay.
Would you bring Al Woods back?
No.
Really?
Like 35 years old.
Yeah, but those guys can play that position, man, till old. Like,
you need someone who can get into the backfield.
As Brian says, be fat and plug a hole.
Ryan Monet is Al Woods, though, and he costs league minimum.
But that's what I'm saying. Al Woods isn't going to cost much.
Yeah, but why do you need Al Woods? You already have Brian Monet. You need someone who can
You can never have enough fat defensive tackles.
You might.
But they can add a Al Woods or whatever, right? I mean, that's fine. But I mean, if you roll it back and your core, interior group is Reed, Monet, and Poona, I'm totally fine with that. Like, I don't see this as a spot that they need to upgrade at or anything.
I'm curious what a guy like Jarrell Casey, Kwan Short, what those guys will make, because
Eric Wolf.
Because he's not the same in this case. He's more of an end. But yeah, Sheldon Rankins. Like, if it's trading, like cutting Reed or trading Reed and getting a draft pick, and then it's signing one of those guys at a similar price, I would do that.
Yeah, I think Reed is an obvious place to open up salary, like way better place than Dunlap, right? But just in terms of, talent there, right? If that's the group again in 2021, I don't have any concerns about it, right? Other than whatever missed opportunity, right? The opportunity cost of keeping Reed.
So what I'm hearing, and you guys tell me if you see differently, is extend Dunlap. That's basically the move on defensive end. We're not talking about really signing anyone else, maybe some vet guy at some cheap price. Defensive tackle, sounds like most of you are comfortable standing pat with what we've got, but if it's possible to move Reed for something that makes sense, in favor of that. We're like pretty much in agreement on this position, which we were all last year too. And I don't know, I'm kind of bullish on that group. I'd like to see the defensive tackle group take a step forward in talent, but
well, there's like some real optimism about improvement from some of those young guys, right? Like, they didn't have Darrell Taylor last year. Like, even
LJ Collier had a decent year. Wasn't great. I'm not saying he's going to be some superstar, but like, is it out of the realm of possibilities that he's going to be better next year? I don't think so. Like, could he be better next year than he was last year? And he had, 20, 25 pressures, whatever it was. I thought he started to show some progress. So, okay, let's take some Patreon questions. Evan, do you have those in front of you?
Yeah, we got a ton. So, I'm debating whether or not I want to ask the first question that came up. Nathan, should the Seahawks trade Bobby Wagner, and what do you think is a realistic return on that?
I've been saying this for years that they should trade Bobby Wagner. Literally, like
Don't you think it's flipped to where the what they get back would not
They
be?
probably missed the boat on. I think Nathan was right.
I probably, yeah, but he is still expensive enough that if you can trade him, I mean, I don't think that's where you necessarily look to like open up space or anything, but I think you're going to definitely get more back for Bobby than you would for Jaron Reed or something like that. So yeah, I mean, I think that's starting to kind of cross the risk or the value there. The value isn't there like it was, a year or two ago when you could legitimately think about getting a first round pick. But yeah, I don't think that's a bad idea. I mean, Bobby probably doesn't have a lot of years left. And I know that I said that like 2 or 3 years ago, but like we're up against it now. Like, I don't know how long he's going to be a high level player. So
It's going to be the year 2027, and Nathan's going to be like, it's time to trade Bobby Wagner. His peak return, peak value.
man, if he's still here in 2027, that'd be awesome. Like, that's great.
Oh man.
The idea hurt at the time, but I think Nathan was absolutely right about that.
So
I like how it's always that it's just Nathan. Nathan and I were both saying it together.
No, just Nathan.
yeah, but Nathan was more aggressive about it.
Fine, Brian, you were right too.
So a lot of these
right. It's just we had the same point of view on that one. We
Yeah,
rarely agree, so it was very memorable to me.
So a lot of these Patreon questions were frankly answered throughout the show, but there are a couple more. Jeff, I'll give you this one. Who do you think has the highest ceiling of any front seven currently playing on the roster? That's a good question.
Highest ceiling?
Yeah.
Probably Jordan Brooks.
Huh.
Probably Jordan Brooks. Daryl Taylor is just, you don't know. He does have a massive ceiling, but I've never seen him play in the NFL. So
is Puna even in that conversation for you?
Puna?
Yeah.
I think Brooks' ceiling is higher, significantly higher. I think his talent level, and I think you start to see at the end of the year. I know some of the grading sites didn't agree, but he looked like a first round caliber player, and the Seahawks really haven't had that. I was going on a rant about how bad their drafting's been, and they really haven't had a first round hit. And Brooks looks like a guy who actually has legitimate first round talent, and that was refreshing to see.
I thought you would have said Alton.
I see Brooks is much higher ceiling.
But I think Alton is above Puna or Monet.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Taylor has technically a high ceiling. It's just we don't know what it is.
Well, he's a complete unknown. So
yeah.
I mean,
limitless ceiling.
Yeah.
He's Derek's favorite player.
John Hurlbutt, sponsor of the show. Thank you for your longtime support. Asked me, why won't Evan go to In-N-Out Burger with me when I'm in Phoenix? The answer is I am waiting on my second dose, John, and I DM'd you with that. So check your Twitter DMs. That's a really important Seahawks question. How does J.J. Watt's contract negotiations affect Carlos Dunlap? Not a ton, frankly, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a relative data point, but like, I kind
of disagree. Like,
tell me why. Tell me why,
Nathan. For the same reason that you were saying that Dunlap's not a guy you want to mess around with on his contract or anything, right? Like, things very clearly soured between him and the Bengals, and he pulled all the eject levers he could find.
Yeah.
And so I just wonder if he's not right, whether it's rational or not. He may look at that JJ Watt deal and say, I'm better than JJ Watt right now, right? Why would I not get more than him?
Yeah.
So I do wonder, it doesn't always have to make a lot of sense, right? It's just about how the player interprets it, and maybe he seems like a guy that might kind of take a hard line on it.
It's a good argument. Brian or Jeff, anything to add there?
Nope.
I think it's more of a reason to keep him.
That is all we got. We answered like 90% of our questions throughout the show. So sorry, folks.
All right. Well, I mean, I think where we're ending up here is kind of surprising. Last year, we spent a ton of time on defensive line of being the number one priority. There were so many good players available in free agency. We spent all this time talking about Jadeveon Clowney, who ended up with no sacks at all, and Everson Griffin, who did almost nothing last year, and a bunch of these guys. And now, with the moves the Seahawks made, which were not the moves we said that we wanted them to make, we're kind of saying actually they're set up pretty good this year.
Yeah.
Like I don't hear any of you saying if they went into the season with the defensive line they've got on the roster right now, I don't think I'm hearing anyone crying foul with that, which is a huge, huge step from where we were last year at being the number one priority position.
It's just incredible how one guy made such a difference.
It wasn't just one guy, though, Evan. I think that's mischaracterized. I thought Dunlap was huge, but Alton Robinson was a big step forward. He played really well.
Yes, but the unit-wide performance was not a drastic improvement without Dunlap.
I think that's right. But I mean,
they were improved.
Yeah,
I will give you that.
And for as much as I know we kind of push each other back and forth about Jaron Reed, like he did play better with a good player next to him.
He did.
He was not a nothing, in that situation. He had some contribution there. So he would not be the only defensive tackle that benefits from having a stud defensive end next to him. Like that's kind of one of the things. So anyway, I think that's interesting. Linebacker's a sneaky one. I mean, KJ Wright made a lot of plays for this team last year. He made a lot of plays for this team last year. He might have been the best defensive player on the team.
That's what I was just about to ask. Was he the best in a single year view of 2020, the 2020 season? Was he their best defensive player? I think he was. I wouldn't say his top level game was the best, but if you take his whole contribution across the season, I don't think anyone had added more value. Whatever like that AV or whatever the metrics are, average annual or something like that. Yeah.
I thought he had the most value that he added to the Seahawks on defense. Anyway, so you're talking about losing your best player on defense, at least from last year.
It's just, if all things were equal and there was no salary cap, bring him back. But the Seahawks have painted themselves in a corner.
He's an interesting one though, in that you can definitely, make the argument that he was their best defender last year, but can you make much of an argument that he was their most impactful defender?
No, Dunlap.
No, Dunlap, Adams, even, right?
Sure.
Yeah, like even Bobby had moments where he flashed and stuff. So.
Yeah, and you got to look at this like a stock market. You're not when you guys. I don't know if you guys played, but when you're buying a stock, you're not paying for something that they used to do. You're paying for what they're going to do next, and you want return on investment. And KJ wants his money. And are you going to pay $9 million for what KJ is going to do as age 31, age 32, it's probably not a smart investment.
And you did spend a first round pick on Jordan Brooks, and there's sunk cost or whatever, but he looks promising. You have Blair coming back, right? Amadi played
huge return for Blair. So excited about it.
Yeah, so excited. But so, and maybe there's more you can do with Adams and get a little bit more creative with him if you have Blair back. And again, Amadi I thought played well. So like if you're just I just don't know that, like, even though he was maybe their best defender, like I don't know that he is going to leave a huge gap or is.
Well, that's the thing. And we don't have to have that whole conversation over again. I just think it's interesting when we're netting out on this, like letting the best defensive player walk. We're all pretty much in agreement on that, on the price. That's a big deal. Keep the defensive line, sign a vet at linebacker, and then see what you get with Brooke Hervin and Cody Barton behind them and see if they can rise up. And maybe you get an undrafted free agent. The thing with linebacker is young players can have an impact right away. Jordan Brooks had an impact right away. Bobby Wagner as a rookie, KJ Wright as a rookie had impacts right away. So, but you are gambling. So, it's an interesting thing. And what it means is where they're going to have to upgrade and be a better team than they were last year is two things: other positions, which we're not talking about today, or the young players are going to have to take steps forward. Like, you need Alton Robinson to not be a 5-sack guy, but to be an 8-9 sack guy. You need Darrell Taylor to be not a 0-game, 0-sack guy, but someone who can actually make a difference. You need Poona Ford to be the guy that he was the last part of the season instead of the guy he was for the beginning of the season. So, it's just, it'll be interesting. And gosh, if Cody Barton could step up and be a legitimate starter, then you're talking about something. So
it's all part of that. They're paying Bobby so much money because they're paying Bobby $17 million, by far the highest paid linebacker in the league, other than that one outlier contract. This is the lingering damage of that.
Yeah. So that is the episode tonight, folks. Defensive line, I should say, linebacker, and a little bit of Russell Wilson talk. If you haven't already, sign up over at patreon.com/hawkblogger. Get in right now to the Slack channel. A lot of great active conversations going on. I saw people popping up today with, Gabe Jackson and other folks coming available. Everyone's talking about what's going on free agency. And you'll get your questions asked and answered on the show. And then subscribe, click the little bell, give us a like if you haven't already, please. That helps get the show to more people. And we will be back. Is it next week, Evan?
Yeah, because free agency starts on March 17th.
Yeah, so we'll be back next week to talk about cornerbacks and safeties. Is that right, Mr. Simmons?
Yep, Dayna will be back to talk about her favorite position, cornerback and safeties. And Evan's right. So there's one more. We have Wednesday's the last free agency show, and the Wednesday after that is when free agency opens. So
I'm really looking forward to next week's show, mainly because Dayna will be there, but also because cornerback and safety, there's going to be some interesting conversation. Jamal Adams, not a straight answer on that guy among this group. And cornerback, there's some really cool choices there. I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks the team should do. I certainly have my point of view ready to go there. So thank you guys all for tuning in. Have a great night. And